Well, here we go. What is this new, Ryan? Episode 9? Episode 9 of the Hunting Land Man podcast, brought to you by Southern Ag Credit, our good friends over at Southern Ag Credit. Take good care of us. Y'all really don't know how much I'm on the phone and on emailing with this crew and how much business we do with them. They do a great job. There's a lot of good companies out there that finance land, but I promise you I use them the most, and we thank them for being part of the Hunt Land Man podcast. Today we got a special treat. We got Mr. Don Bales on the podcast here today, and Don is a longtime friend. I've probably known Mr. Don, I want to say, over 25 years. How old was Cliff when y'all came to Central?
Oh, 14, 11.
Yeah, so probably about 25 years. But Don is a Realtree land pro. He works for us over there at Southern States Realty, and Don has kind of been Don's kind of the blame probably. If I ask my dad, he's probably the blame a little bit for my infatuation for deer hunting. So Don was kind of my family's biologist. He was a county agent in Wilson County for, I don't know, about 10 years.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Don, he helped a whole lot of my deer education. And some of the things back in the old days, you look back and laugh at now. I remember in 1996, we planted soybeans. You probably remember that year in the Devil's Backbone, one of our food plots at our place, and there was 16 rack bucks in that field. My dad filmed that afternoon. And in Southwest Mississippi at that time, that was like unbelievable, record breaking. Right. Yeah, it was like nothing we had ever seen. And looking back now, we can do that on a lot of these places, but back then to have it on video and have proof, because trail cameras weren't even hardly a thing back then. I mean, there were some here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the early days when we first started doing the trail camera census. Mm-hmm. We had to take the film to the drugstore, get it developed, and analyze the photographs that way.
Well, so Don, he lives over in the Hattiesburg area. Don, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your history that maybe I won't be able to repeat good, but you just where your deer education, and kind of give us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I grew up in Picayune, Mississippi, went to Pearl River Junior College, played football there, and then I was off to Mississippi State. I always had an interest in wildlife and things related to it, and I started doing taxidermy work at the age of 12 years old. And eventually I worked my way through college doing taxidermy work. Got a degree in forestry with wildlife option. Eventually over the years got my certified wildlife biologist credentials, registered forester of course, and just been in that field my entire career. I really love land. I love the wildlife. I love working with the people, helping them achieve their objectives. You mentioned in Wilkinson County as a county agent, I think I was the only one that was a DMAP biologist, of course. Great place to be a biologist too. So at one time I had over 30 clubs that I consulted with, and we had the doe tags back then and all that. So it's just been my career to help people with land and with wildlife management. I love it. I'm gonna do it until the day I can't do it anymore.
And something I like about Don, look, Don is we consult back and forth on a lot of things and talk about deer, and we can literally sit and talk about deer all day, every day, elk and turkeys and everything. Something that I think Don is different from a biologist standpoint is a lot of deer biologists hunt, but Don is super passionate about it. He loves it. He spends every hour when he's not with his family or going to church, he spends in the woods doing something like that when he can. And, I just don't meet a whole lot of biologists that have that kind of passion. Don is a huge bow hunter, huge recurve and longbow hunter. Was it a recurve or a longbow you killed the big deer in Centerville with?
It was a recurve. I killed several nice ones with a recurve, and just that's a passion.
Right,
I mean, if it gives you a rush to shoot a deer with a bow as opposed to a high-powered rifle, back on down to a 15 to 18 yard weapon and look them in the eye, it's a special rush.
It really is, and I have not. I took one hunting a couple of times after I tagged out in some places, but I've never been successful. But it really is everybody who does it, it's just you got to be willing to walk away without a kill a lot of times, but it's a different sport for sure.
Right, you do skin a lot less deer if you hunt with traditional gear.
So if you don't like skinning deer, baby,
that's a good way to go.
That's right. Well, Don actually grew up. Well, when he lived in Wilson County, he lived in the Whitaker, I guess you'd call it, area, which is where my house is, probably, I don't know, 5 miles, 6 miles from where my house is. So we know a lot about that land, those landowners, and about that area. So we are always talking. We were looking at maps earlier. Something we want to do on the podcast today, we get off on all kinds of tangents on this thing, is we want to talk about time of the year, and what's going on. It's actually raining outside right now in the south. It is the middle of May, and if you haven't already, it's time. Turkey season's over in the south. It's time to start thinking about next year's deer season. What you're doing for your deer now, because what you're doing for your deer now is going to significantly affect, their horn growth and deer that are on your place now. So if you're going to do any timber or habitat improvement, or if you're going to do any summer food plots or supplemental feeding, mineral stations, water stations, you name it, you got to be thinking about that stuff now. So let's just take, for instance, my home place. It's kind of my testing grounds. I've had a real fun with it and probably go way over and above. I've got protein feed out. My clover is I just had a crimson clover, so it's all about gone now. And you can see in the deer activity, it's something really cool to have that big field in my front yard, because I see what the deer are doing every day. It's okay. I remember when that stuff was just budding out right after the ryegrass and the wheat was kind of tasseling out, and that crimson was coming up those deer. You could see it. I mean, there was significant about more deer activity when you pulled in the driveway in the afternoon, and now it's tapered off. So it's cool to be able to see it in front of your front eyes every day in front of your house. But Don, tell me this, from your standpoint, if we're middle of May, is it time to be planting summer food plots now? Are we late? Are we early? Or you need to be getting on it now? You tell me.
Well, it relates somewhat to ground temperatures, and it depends on what you're planting. Some of the things, like for instance, Allie's clover, you need to wait a little bit later, up in between now and June 15th.
Have you heard about Allie's clover this year? I hate to interrupt you, but
No.
I talked to the co-op the other day, and somewhere where they get the seed, I think it's in Florida or somewhere like that, they had something happened to it last year, and you can't hardly buy Allie's clover this year. Now that's from one co-op I talked to.
Yeah, hadn't heard that. Hadn't heard that.
Go ahead.
The point being made is that you need to consider the species of the forage that you're planting, and whether the ground's right yet or not, the ground temperature's right. And then of course and let's talk about actually planting it. I used to do talks, and I used to emphasize this every single time. What you plant is not nearly as important as how you plant. You got to have a good, firm, smooth seed bed. You don't need just a bunch of big old clots out there, rough it up, and just go out there and throw some seed that comes with a fancy bag and think that's going to do the trick for you. Soil testing is important. As a former county agent, we always emphasize that. If the forage that you're planting needs a pH up around 6, then you're going to go out there on a pH of 4.3 and plant whatever it is, you're going to fail at it. Everything else is not going to matter how well you do it. You got to get the pH up to match that particular forage's minimum requirements.
What are most summer food plots? I know like 7's neutral. What's kind of I know from experience in most places, with pine straw and leaves, most things are down in the 4s in our area. What's kind of a bare, if you're going to plant a soybean or a cowpea or an Allie's clover, what's kind of a bare minimum that you need?
I would shoot for 6.0 if I could get it, between 6 and 6.5. If you get down in the high 4s, you wasted your time. Some things in our winter forages, our cool season stuff, you can get by with a little bit less. You can get by with low 5s, but always try to get it at least in the high 5s and somewhere around 6.0 to 6.5 if you can get it. It is well worth the time and money spent to put the lime out, because it just enriches it. It helps the soil chemistry. The uptake of the elemental plant needs is better when the pH is balanced. And you're just fighting a losing battle of planting on a poor seed bed in a hurry and not having planned it all out well.
I know a lot of these things, Don. I'm going to re-educate myself, but really educate our viewers. Okay, what happens if I go out there and plant tomorrow? Is my plant's not going to grow as good? If they're not going to have the protein, what happens if I don't do that? We're just trying to emphasize the importance.
Okay, You know what came to mind is I used to have some slides that I presented talks about food plots with. They were taken from Tatum. There was a place where the pH was about 4.8, and there was another place where the pH was up around 6. And I had photographs aimed down into the forage, and you could see bare ground in the one that had the lowest pH. The one with the correct pH was lush and green with clover and wheat and oats mix, whatever we had there. It was a cool season forage. Mm-hmm. But I distinctly remember that the plant population is lower, it's going to grow slower, and proteins related to nitrogen content, it can't pick up the nitrogen if the soil chemistry is not right, or you have to supply it with a nitrogen fertilizer.
So a lot of reason to have your pH, and where I'm fixing to plant my mixed summer food plots, brand new ground. It's part of my things I've got to do in the next 2 weeks is get some soil samples. I know I'm gonna have to put some lime. I guess the question is usually, is it gonna be 2 tons or 3 or 4, whatever it is. So I know this, but Don, I know that if you put your lime out tomorrow, yes, it really doesn't go into full effect 60 or 90 days, but it starts helping immediately. But it doesn't go into full effect for a while. Is that correct?
Correct. Let's back up and talk about soil sampling just a minute. You don't know how many times I had as a county agent. I get a box and I can tell that it's a piece of a part of a shovel. Mm-hmm. They went out in one spot in the field and stuck a shovel in the ground and filled a soil sample box up and brought it in. All right, that'd be like going in a school elementary classroom and measuring one child in there and saying the average child in here is 4 feet tall.
Right.
You didn't sample the entire thing. So what you have to do is, and it's pretty easy to do. There's soil probes to do it. You can get one from the county extension office, or they sell them every day. You just go in maybe 20 spots around in the field, zigzag your way across it, low spots, high spots. Don't discriminate about where you put the soil probe in the ground. Put it in a bucket, mix it all up, put it in the box. If you're going to plant 20 food plots, if they're similar in nature, you don't need to pay for 20 soil samples unless you got 20 really big fields, and then it's worth the investment. But if you're planting 20 food plots on a typical hunting lease or property, you can go out and get 4, 5, or 6 cores from field 1, field 2, field 3 and mix them up, because odds are when you bring your planting equipment in there, and if it's for cool season forages for the winter that you're going to plant in maybe September, you're probably going to have the seed mixed up, and you're going to drive the buggy from plot to plot.
And you're not going to be able to get it so specific with the lime or the fertilizer. It's going to be let's see how we did. Yeah, it's going to be an average anyway.
Yeah, we're going to do an average thing, and I used to do that at a property that I managed, and I had 20-something food plots, and I averaged them out. We brought the buggy in, and we knew we had 300 pounds of fertilizer, and the application rate was pretty much the same across the spectrum of all the different plots.
And for everybody, Melissa just stepped in. For everybody watching, we are filming our first podcast, and we're recording our first podcast in my office here at Southern States Realty. It just felt like we needed to do that over here today. We've got a new camera we're filming with, so we got all kinds of new stuff. But I really like where we're heading, because as much as I've heard Don and other people talk about this stuff, it's always Don's an expert on this stuff and has done a lot of research, and it's good to to reiterate some of these things. New Ryan, you learned anything over there about lime your food plots? And none of us do a good enough job, and it does cost money. But Don, answer me this, and I've asked this question before, but for our viewers, okay, yeah, I spent an extra $500 on lime this year, name your price. In the fall, it pays itself back. Is that not correct? Or whenever you plant.
Correct. And let me tell you about something that we did on a landowner, and I won't call the name. They had been putting out 300 pounds of triple 13 on all their food plots every year, 20-something acres worth. I said, let's soil test it. Let's see where we are. You may not need to put the P and the K. You may not need to do that. And that's phosphorus and potash, or K2O.
Especially if you've been doing it that long, huh?
Right. If you've been doing it that long, the deer are eating it, and they're coming and going. It's not like a corn crop or a soybean crop that you're harvesting it and hauling it off the site. So you're building up those nutrient levels in the soil, and if the pH is good. So we sampled all that stuff, and we were able to fine tune the fertilizer program. We saved him, I think, something like $3,000 on those
Wow.
food plots in 1 year. That's pretty significant. He had been liming well. He had been putting a lot of fertilizer out, and all he was doing every year was putting extra fertilizer out there. We saved him a ton of money. Just about 30 acres.
Just
of
by
plots.
putting a line. Well, just by testing.
Yeah, we backed down on the fertilizer. In some cases, it was almost no P&K fertilizer, just nitrogen.
Wow. I know Don and every biologist and everybody that spends time doing food plots, clovers are such a big part of the food plot equation, especially in the perennial game. And and Don, I want you to correct me where I'm wrong, but in my experience, if everybody, usually if they buy the fancy bag, it's got some perennial clovers in it, and if you're doing it every year, you're getting a lot of ladino clovers out there. And it seems like the plots that you didn't take care of, all of them, in February and early in March, oh man, my clovers look good, and all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. And in my experience, it seems to be that those plots that you didn't do your soil samples and you didn't do your lime, it goes a lot faster. Like there's almost no chance of carrying that clover into July, August, as opposed to a plot that you did lime and take care of it. Am I wrong there? I know there's spraying a lot that has to do with that, but does that lime help that clover be a better plant, better root system to last more drought tolerant, I guess?
Right. Again, everything is right. The plant grows to its maximum genetic potential. It's going to have a deeper, healthier root system, so it's going to withstand drought better. Again, a lot of the cool season forages do begin to wane as it gets hotter and hotter. It's for when clovers come. The crimson clovers first to die off. Then you got white clovers, ladinos, and several others. They last longer, and then the red clovers will last even a little bit longer than that. In some cases, in a wet summer, you may still have a pretty good looking field of red clover in July, all the way up into late July actually. Just depends on how much rainfall you're getting.
Right. And there's so many factors when you talk about trying to make a clover plot last. And look, you can do it. There's always a cocoa grass or a armyworm issue and things, deer pressure and things like that. But man, if you can get a clover food plot to last 5 or 7 years and treat it right, there's nothing prettier, and there's nothing that deer and turkeys like better. It's like it's kind of like when you walk onto that Centerville County football field and everything's just right. You just kind of want to run and go catch a pass. It seems like deer like it out there. It's clean. I don't know. I guess it's cool to lay down in. Not only is good to eat, but they just like, and you see it across the country. I'll never forget when I hunted in Pike County, Illinois, on a bunch of ground there. They had some really pretty food plots. And it didn't matter if we were up there during turkey season, deer season. If you pulled in those clover fields, and look, they had corn and soybeans everywhere, but if you pulled in those clover fields, there was just deer there. If they were laying down or hanging out, something about it, they like them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, Don. So we've covered a little bit of the lime. What should we be doing right now? All right, let's take another step. Okay, what about minerals? Are you a big minerals fan, or should we be putting out minerals right now? Should we already have them out? Should we be refreshing our mineral sites? Just speak on that a little bit.
Okay, let's back up and look at some of the research that's been done in the past. And at a population level, it's never been proven that any particular hunter or group of hunters putting out minerals is going to make a real significant difference. Yeah, individual deer could benefit. I understand all that. It may attract them. You get more pictures. I'm not denying any of that, but I'm just saying if you had 10,000 acres and you had the deer data and you looked at the average body weights and main beam length of your 3.5 and older harvested, if you looked at every set of data you had for 10 years and then started using minerals and looked at it 10 years later, there's never been any research yet that I'm aware of. I don't read the literature every day. But it's never been proven that mineral content works. All right, now.
I just kind of set you up for that because I knew that's what you were going to say.
Right. If you go from, that's why we have bigger, better deer in those areas where the soil is rich. It all goes back to the dirt. It always goes back to the soil, what's in it, and how available are those nutrients. pH, you can have a lot of potassium in the soil, but if pH is not right, your plant can't get it out. I used to have a chart in the slide presentation that I did, and it showed the availability of phosphorus and potassium and some of the other nutrients too, calcium and others. How available is that for plants to pick up? And you can see those things slide down. When the pH starts going down, you will see that the availability of those nutrients drop. So when you put lime out there, your basic P and K, it's going to be more uptakeable by the plant community. And that's what happens naturally in places where the soil is naturally 6 or more pH. There's areas where the soil is too alkaline. You have to do something about that. But we don't have that problem around here, and in most places we don't. A lot of people don't understand that in a place where the soil is really, really good in the Delta, they don't even have a fertilizer input. The legume, the soybean is a legume like a clover. They don't need nitrogen because they make it themselves from the nodules on the roots. So if we're going to plant something that needs nitrogen, a lot of our cool season forages, when you mix clover in with it, the deer are biting the clover off, and every time those leaves are bitten off, those nodules respond to fix more nitrogen for the plant to uptake. And it's a crazy system. God was a genius, and everybody knows he's a genius. I know that. He designed every bit of this stuff, and it works the way it works. It just does.
Don brought up something earlier in what he was talking about, and I say it all the time. A deer is no better than the soil he's standing on, for the most part. And Don also said in that we manage deer for populations, not individual deer. Now there's individual deer all throughout. I think about it all the time. There was a big deer killed a couple years ago, a 200-inch deer killed in Walthall County. But if you think you can go to Walthall County next year and kill a bunch of 200-inch deer, you probably not going to be the case.
No.
So we really look at the median. What if we're in the average area, a 5-year-old deer is going to be 120 or 140. That's what we're looking for. We're managing deer for populations, but it's a deer, and it was. I tell you, I talked about this in another podcast, and you'll like this, Don. We get stuck at Disney World earlier this year, and I drove from Disney World all the way up to here, and a lot of the same species of trees grow from here all the way to Disney World. I talked about water oak and a couple of different pine, and if you see them down there in that soil versus one that grows in Wilkes County in a river soil, closer to the river, it almost looks like a different tree. And if you think about it, okay, well, the deer's the same way. If he's standing in Wilkes County or he's standing in Pearl River County, the average deer, he's going to have a bigger body weight, and it's no different if he's standing in Iowa, higher north in the range, but if he's standing in Iowa versus standing down here, but so our trees are going to grow better, our plants are going to grow better, and our deer is going to grow better where they're standing on better soil. Am I wrong?
Yeah. If you get far enough south, then the temperature things, the variations genetically within the species, for instance, the Everglades deer, totally different rut, totally different body sizes. It just makes a lot of sense for an animal that lives where it's hot not to be real big, not to be real thick. And there's a rule in biology, I think it's called Bergman's rule, that mammals are bigger in the more northern part of their range. White-tailed deer in northern Wisconsin are bigger than deer in North Louisiana. Assuming all other things with soil fertility being equal, they are just bigger because they need to be bigger to conserve heat.
Yeah, I think you taught me that the farther you go north in a deer's range, historically, the bigger they get.
Correct.
And of course, there's, like we said, there's, you can take an individual deer in Wilkes County and you may weigh 300 pounds, but that's not normal. That's not something we see all day, every day. All right, we talked about minerals, and as y'all heard it, there's no proven research. Now it's fun to have a mineral stuff, and in August stick a camera on there and have every buck come to it. That's fun, and I actually went to a little deer school one time, Don, at the Sanctuary, historic Purina proven grounds, one of the oldest high fences in the country, and they had a bunch of biologists, and basically they were trying to sell us Purina feed, and they said it's not been proven that if the deer are eating the Purina feed that they need minerals. That's what they were saying. Now, and to your point, I guess it would be it's not been proven that they need it if they're eating any good forage. But anyway, all right. So we talked about summer food plots. We talked about We talked about minerals. What about supplemental feeding, Don? I mean, there's a couple of different conversations to have about that topic. Let's just talk about deer. Let's say we know that we need to be doing all things well. We don't need to rely on one. But if you are, if you got some summer food plots, if it's clover or beans or whatever you're doing, what do you think about the supplemental feeding?
All right, let's go back to basic biology and talk about the whole spectrum of what deer need. All right, as a trained wildlife biologist, our first response to that kind of question is supply everything you can naturally by habitat management. We were taught diversity is the key to good wildlife habitat. You don't want a monotype of nothing but all the same type of plants everywhere. You need certain kind of plants that flourish this time of year. That's why mixes for food plots are good. Supplemental feeding does have a place, but I've seen people, especially within high fences, try to rely too much on supplemental feeding and carry a level of deer that they could not possibly carry. The deer eat up all the forage, and you can see underneath it like somebody went and cut down every leaf, everything is gone.
And even in non-fenced places, I've seen the same thing of just so many deer. There's some places in Missouri I've been like that. But go ahead.
Right. Then the other thing about protein, deer are going to get bigger, healthier, and if they got a high protein intake from natural forages, it's probably going to be because they got a good mineral balance in the soil, and they're picking up that too. So they're going to be getting everything they need. All right. But as deer numbers grow, they get less and less opportunity to eat the highest quality plants. So population management comes in with helping your deer have everything they need at the right levels so that they all get a good share of the good stuff that's out there. All right, where supplemental feeding comes in is, let's just say that you're carrying a level of deer that you're dependent on your summer food plots to support that population's food needs, and they eat about 3 pounds of dry matter a day for every 100 pounds. So if you look at what they need and you say, golly, it's a drought, you may want to boost your summer supplemental feeding a little bit. And I've had a lot of people tell me that their feeders, they can tell when something's really good going on in the spring. They see the supplemental food use back off. All right, let's go into cost. All right, how much does a pound of protein supplied to your deer herd cost you opposed to what it would cost you to grow it or even to manage for it? In some good, well-managed stands, you can grow 400 or 500 pounds of really high quality forage. In some cases, you can grow it.
And he means stands of timber or stands, things like that.
Yeah,
right.
Stands of timber. Within that native habitat, you may can have a 5-acre food plot, but 100 acres of really well-managed timberland can support the same amount of deer as what you're supporting with no habitat and 5 acres of food plot. I used to do all these calculations. I'd sit for hours and calculate. And we did that one time because I convinced your dad that he was planting too much. I mean, he was planting so much stuff, he was spending more money than he needed to because there wasn't enough deer out there to eat it all.
Right. I remember Don and I, in my teenage years, we'd go up to the pecan orchard. You know where that is, New Ryan. We'd go up there, and it was old home site, so it was more privet hedge up there for whatever reason because it was old home site, and we would look at, they're feeding here, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, I think I'm repeating you when I say this, a fertilized privet hedge bush, not too tall or whatever, like a lush field of privet hedge, if you will, fertilized, is as good for a deer as a fertilized soybean. Am I not right?
All right. I will never forget the day that your dad and I drove into a food plot. I can't remember the name of it.
Airstrip.
No, northeast part of the property, not too far from the fence. It wasn't a moccasin, but it was close to it, somewhere up there. Anyway, we drive in there, and he's wanting to show me how beautiful soybeans are. We drive into that field, and there's a velvet buck on his hind legs eating privet hedge, which proves they like variety. Mm-hmm. Even with soybeans, he had his fill of soybeans, so he was over there standing on his hind legs getting the best of the privet hedge. I used to test those things. I'd send it to the forage lab, and I got 18-20% crude protein in privet hedge. I'm not advocating everybody go plant privet hedge. It's an invasive. It is a big problem in a lot of our bottomland hardwood forest in southwest Mississippi. I'm not advocating that, but where you have it. There was a guy that I used to give advice to. He had a tractor with the big sidearm mower thing where you cut fence rows and stuff. So we start going and looking at the property, and I keep pointing out how these privet hedges are cut back. Everywhere he was cutting them down, I could tell where they were coming up. I can remember one on Whitaker Road. There's a privet hedge in the fence. It never got any taller than the tallest barbed wire because there's so many deer keeping it. We call it keeping it broomed back, or like a bonsai.
Bonsai.
Yeah. All right. So any privet hedge out there, and I used to go on properties in Wilkinson County, and I could give you a pretty good idea of the relative deer population by how hard they were hitting that privet hedge. That means there was a lot of quality forages out there that had already eaten up, and it is itself a high quality forage. And the more pressure they put on that, the more deer I knew were there.
And if you've ever done this, bow hunters, and I've seen it, and I know you've seen it. You go out and you're getting in 2 weeks before bow season, you're trimming up, or a week before bow season, you're trimming up a couple of limbs or whatever, and you throw it all on the ground. You come back to check your stand, and what are the deer eating? They're eating all that fresh privet hedge that was up high they couldn't get to that you just cut down. They're wearing it out.
Or any other thing. And some of your people listening or watching this are going to be surprised when I say this. In a recent test done at Mississippi State, which was a very crude experiment. By the way, the Mississippi State deer podcast, the lab stuff they do at the MSU Deer Lab is phenomenal, but they put some different things out in deer pens. Poison ivy is one of the things that was the most favored in that group. All right, in the Mississippi Delta, if you see a big old dead tree that's got covered with poison ivy, if a storm blew that thing down, you can go cut down one of those trees full of poison ivy and put a stand on it because deer are coming to it. They will demolish it.
Wow.
It's not allergic to them, it's allergic to us.
It's something
Turkey eat the berries.
you told me about, and then I did a little research, and there was an MSU Deer Lab thing, was the mineral stump. And I don't mean mineral stump I don't mean it in some trace minerals. I mean it in, you go ahead, I need to.
All right, for years, everybody that's been observant in the woods noticed back in the oil exploration days when a skidder come through, and wherever they would run over or cut down sweet gums or oaks or anything, in a place where the deer didn't have a lot of forage, and those things that were cut down started growing back up, the deer were hammering those sprouts that were coming back up. I can remember one time around Roxy, Mississippi, seeing little sweet gum trees 5 feet tall, and it was obvious the deer were riding them things down so they could eat the leaves off the top of them. All right, so what Marcus Lashley, I know his last name is Lashley, I'm thinking it's Marcus, but he's at the University of Florida now, but he did the research, and they call him the mineral stump man now, I think, but it just makes sense. If you've got a tree that will grow up to a 3-inch or 4-inch diameter, it's got this extensive root system, you cut it down, all right, all that root system is feeding just a few little sprouts, so they are extremely rich in mineral content, which that's why they come up with the name the mineral stump. And you can go out, if you don't believe it, go anywhere in your place, find any kind of halfway desirable tree, black gum and some others, sassafras, dogwood. We don't want to cut dogwoods down because we almost don't have them anymore. But when you cut those down and just put a camera on it, and you're gonna see when it starts growing, those deer are gonna hammer the sprouts.
It's crazy. Do you remember me showing you that in the woods? And I showed you Ryan that in the woods one day. I take some of Don's stuff he taught me, and I make myself look smart. But I always thought that was real cool, and it just makes sense. All of a sudden, you got a tree cut down, and you got these. And he said a 3 or 4 inch tree, but think about it if it's an 18-inch tree, because I've seen it in that. Mm-hmm. You know, you go cut down. If you watch, like if you cut down a big tree last year that was in your shooting lane, go look by your stand where there's a bunch of little old bushes this much by it now. You know, it's 6 or 8 inches tall, and those deer are wearing out because they have an extensive root system. And it's like you say, God was a great designer. When he sat out there before the foundation of the world one day, he said, you know, this is going to really entertain Don and Slade. So, but all really, really cool things. And it's just, I learned something every time I talk to Don about these sort of things, and you know, it kind of makes you want to go do a test site of your own. Okay, let's go mow some privet, fertilize it, and cut a couple of trees down and put us a mow stand by it. It makes you want to test it, and none of us do enough of that type of stuff around here because it's easy to go buy it in a 50-pound sack and throw it out there and put a camera up, but none of us do enough of that type of stuff, and we know it works, and we all need to come back to that some. Well, Don, we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about because I know we could do this for hours. You got your real estate license 2 years ago now?
It's been about 3 now. I've been most active since I got more active after being fully retired.
And what's it been like being a real estate agent?
I absolutely love it because it's a continuation of what I did before, but now I'm gonna get paid for it.
That's always good. That's always good. Well,
I can't tell you how many times Scott Lindsay called me and said, I got a client and I'm gonna tell him to call you. He's looking at 2 different tracts. You tell him which one from a deer management standpoint would be his best choice. And the guy would call me. Sometimes they didn't call, but I would have that input. And I know Scott appreciated it. And ever since then I thought, one day when I grow up, I'm gonna be a realtor.
So if you are looking at a hunting property, Don podcast, if you're looking for a property, if you wanted somebody like me or somebody like Don, I mean, nothing against people that sell houses all day, every day, but if that's all you do and if you're not involved in everything and have a passion for the outdoors, I think if you're going to buy a hunting property, you're going to do yourself a disservice by not having, as a client, you may know a lot of these things, but why not having somebody on your team with the same filter you have, or maybe you don't know all these things, but you daggone need somebody that knows, hey, yeah, I know this is cut over now, but it's going to hold a lot of deer, or this place, man, I like it with the history of deer, or something local knowledge to the fact of, man, I don't care how good a deer you can grow here, the neighbor shoots every 2-year-old and walks. All those sort of things. And let's take the opposite end of the spectrum. We all try, when we look at real estate, we try to look through our own lens, and sometimes you have to take that lens off and figure out, okay, my client may not be interested in shooting 4 or 5-year-old deer with his bow. He may just be interested in shooting deer. And if he's interested in just shooting deer, there's no reason for him to pay extra money to be in an area where you can grow 150s every year. That you may not need to. You may just can be in an area where you can guarantee to see some deer every year, because that may fit that client's goal. So why not, if you're looking for property, get you an agent that knows that sort of thing, and fill them out, look them up, find out if they're hunters like you. It always makes it easier and a more fun experience, no matter what we do in life. If we're hunting whatever we're hunting, whether it be a product or a piece of land or whatever, with somebody with common interests, you feel like you're looking with a friend. So if you call me and you say, Slade, look, I don't want to look at a piece of hunting property unless I can let go a 3-year-old and he probably won't get shot. Well, there's areas you can do that. And you just got to search in the right areas. But all right, Don, so you've enjoyed being a Realtree land pro and selling some land thus far. I know a bunch of your clients that you sold your stuff to and had some really good properties. You were talking about something at lunch that'll be super exciting. Tell us about what you hope to draw and do this fall in the deer woods.
Are you talking about
an Iowa tag?
Midwest?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got 3 points, and maybe I'll draw with 4. I've been up there. I've never gotten my buck yet. I've come close a lot.
How many Iowa tags have you drawn?
For a reef.
Same as me.
Yeah. I've passed up 140s and regretted it. That ain't gonna happen this time.
Let me see. I've gotten 3 Iowa tags. I didn't shoot a deer, and then I went in like a lockdown or something. I mean, they just disappeared, and then I shot a 140, and then I did shoot a 172 the last time I went, so it was good. And the year I killed the 140, I missed a 150 the day before, and I never forget. A lot of y'all watching, I know, Don, you've probably seen this episode. Me and Kevin DePines, my producer, were sitting in the stand. We were sitting in a bow hunting box blind over a soybean field, and it snowed the third week of November up there. And 3 shooters stepped in the field. 3 5-year-old plus deer was in the field. It was 155 inch 10 point, a big heavy mass, probably 140 inch 9 point, and then the deer I actually killed was a big 22 inch wide 9 point. And Colton's, he's freaking out in the blind. What are we gonna do? Which one we gonna shoot? I said, tell you what we're gonna do. first one comes in range, we go shoot him. And that's what we did. Actually, the 155 pushed the 140 to us, and he got to about 27 yards, and we put it through him. But it's a special place up there in Iowa.
Yeah, I'll never forget the first opportunity I had. I got to go to the McAllister Army Ammunition Plant. You've been there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first time that I had ever seen what a whitetail rut really is.
Mm-hmm.
There was 5 to 8 year old bucks. They were running, chasing does all over the place. And it was an Army ammunition plant, and it had a lot of human traffic and activity, and they weren't scared of you. So it offered you the ultimate chance to see how a whitetail deer rut really worked, how it happens. And I was amazed at that. And in order to hunt there, I had to have a traditional bow, and that's what got me hooked on hunting with a recurve bow.
Mm-hmm.
So I borrowed one, and then later I bought one, and I got hooked on it. And I used it in Wilkinson County, and I killed a really nice 5-year-old buck in Wilkinson County with a recurve. Shot him at 12 yards, jumping over a fence. Shot him in midair. I'd love to have a camera over my shoulder to do that, because it would have been a really, really neat hunt for people to see. So I got really interested in all that, but to get back to the Midwest and the rut being different from here, that's what spurred a lot of biologists on to try to get people to do proper population management, take the right amount of does, let bucks mature. Let's try to get our rut somewhat as close as we can to that. We're still not going to get it that close, but what balancing the population does, over time it'll back the rut days up just a little bit. It'll start happening earlier on average, and then you'll just have a whole better hunting experience when you have the sex ratios balanced up and they're after each other more.
Okay, question. When you get your herd right and it starts backing it up, I want to put in a caveat to see if I'm right or wrong. And maybe there's not enough research to actually know. This is my read into that. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. And I'm just old redneck, you just learn watching a lot of deer. I think, for the most part, it happens in a particular area for the most part at the same time every year. But I think the reason it seems to shorten up when you get your population is, well, you're not seeing it. You're not seeing it later because all those does are getting bred during that time. If you talk, and I'm kind of putting two conversations together. I need to back up a little bit. If you ask anybody in Southwest Mississippi, and I know because I'm involved in tens of thousands of acres of high fence, low fence, and so I get to really get a big sample. And somebody says, well, when is the rut in Southwest Mississippi? Well, what's your definition of the rut? That's
exactly.
What's your definition of rut? Now, to me, the rut is when peak breeding happens. And I consider it in Southwest Mississippi, Central Woodville area, December 26th to about January 6th, January 10th, right in there. And that, to me, is a time when a mature buck will bring a doe in a field and he won't let any other bucks get by her. And I've seen that, in person for a long time. Now, the guy that walks in Vines or your local hunting store, he'll say, the rut's January 22nd. I saw 7 does behind 1 buck. Well, what's your definition of the rut? You see what I'm saying? I think as hunters, and you see it all over the internet. Well, the moon this and the moon that, and this cold weather's gonna spark that rut. And I say it sometimes too, but really, you're seeing more deer, so you're seeing the activity of the rut. But I feel like the rut happens the same time every year. Thoughts?
All right, tons of research have verified that with aging fetuses, the rut happens in the Midwest about the same time every year. I mean, well, let's back up.
And it starts
There's different phases of the rut. There's a difference in when is it the best time to try to shoot a buck and when does the breeding occur. Let's go with when does the main breeding occur. The main breeding occurs about the same time every year. There's some biologists, a few of them, that still say the moon affects it a little bit here and there. Some people say you got to think population level and across a whole region, and you got to think about things on a big scale and not, well, I hunted November 3rd through the 7th and I didn't see anything, and then the next year it's really cold on the 3rd through the 7th.
Or you get different food.
Deer in the Midwest got this big, long, thick hair. Just think about it. If it's 65 or 70 degrees and you're sitting out there at 2 o'clock, you're probably not going to see him come by unless you're on a water hole, because he's going to chase does till he can't find one, and then he's going to come drink water or whatever. All right, but if on that same day it's sleeting and the wind's blowing 25 miles an hour and it's 33 degrees, you may be covered up with bucks all day long. So that person that sees that says, man, that's the peak of the rut in this part of northeast Missouri. Because that's when I saw them. It was November the 14th or whatever it was.
Which is my favorite day to hunt in the Midwest.
My favorite day's like 8, 9, 10 November. But I killed a bunch of them in Kansas during that time. But if you look at weather, and let's just say that the deer, the average breeding is supposed to occur up there, say on the 14th of November. All right, 14th of November is when the average doe was bred. All right, if you look at that in the 3 or 4 days either side of that, if it was really hot during that time, hunters are not going to see as much. They're still going to get bred. They're just going to be doing that at night. And the bucks are going to be walking and doing their thing more at night because it's cool enough.
And what causes? Okay, and I know this from hearing it from you, but just for our listeners, what causes a doe to go in heat? Is it the moon? Is it the weather? Or is it?
Well, it's just the basic biological process. It's time, and of course it kind of goes to when is the ideal time. God put this together. When's the ideal time for that fawn to be born? And it's kind of backed up to there. But a lot of stuff is caused by day length. They got things that they receive and they get these signals. You can ask yourself, well, how does a duck know when it's time to start going south? The day's getting, does he have a watch on? No, he didn't have a watch on.
Them up north.
Rednecks everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, when you see Mississippi and Louisiana tags all the way up to Canada, you know we got to start flying south. That's got to be. But all good stuff, and that's what I was getting at, Don, is the amount of daylight a doe receives in her eye. You know, a doe receives in her eye triggers her body into going, into going in heat. And
there, let me throw something in here. There is some research, and among other surveys, not necessarily white-tailed deer, and it may have been proven in white-tailed deer since then, but the presence of a mature male animal, more presence of mature male animals, entices the female breeding cycle to get started.
Wow. What other animals did they do that research on? That's interesting.
Maybe red deer. I'm trying to remember exactly which ones it was, but it was captive, and a lot of research has been done captive, and then research has gotten more sophisticated and able to gather a lot more data from wild populations with DNA studies. Like a lot of people wouldn't believe that a doe can have a twin fawn sired by 2 different fathers, proven by DNA.
Interesting. It just it's so much, and if you're into it like me and Don, there's so many stories we can sit here and tell that I'm having to shut myself up so this podcast isn't 4 hours long. I mean, talking about that, I watched 2 bucks when they fighting. There was bucks running around late January, last does coming in heat, southwest Mississippi, and I watched a spike go up there and breed the doe. Now, did one of those other bucks sire the other fawn that the doe maybe had? Maybe so. It just, it's funny because you hear, well, your 3-year-old and older bucks are going to do most of your reading, and that very well may be the case. But that day it didn't happen. That old spike, he slipped in there and did the nature thing.
Yep.
Well, Don, was there anything else? We're getting we're about an hour in. We're getting kind of towards the end of this thing. I definitely want to have you back on. There's so many ridges we could go down with this thing and talking about. Don's a huge bow hunter and he loves to do it. He kind of, I think, helped start my passion because Don was pretty much, he'd rifle hunt a little bit, but he was pretty much bow only as I was coming up. And I remember the first day I went to the stand during the rut on my family's place with my bow. My dad told me I was crazy. I was going to see a big buck and not get a shot. And sure enough, I did. And I didn't get a shot. And pretty much we all pretty much bow hunt only ever since. It just, if you like to shoot a deer at 300 yards with your gun, more power to you. If I can get him up there within inside 25 yards, there's something special about it. And it gets, you get late January in the south and it's cold. That box stand starts looking really, really nice. But ain't nothing wrong with shooting one with a rifle. But if it was my preference, I wish we just pretty much bow hunt them only. I love it.
All right. The only way to describe it is I'm hard-headed, and to me, the more difficult it is, the more enjoyment I'm going to get out of it. I was in a stand with one of my wildlife clubs that I consult with, and we were sitting there watching some deer, and he offered me the gun. It was probably a 6-year-old buck, big 8-point, about 128, 30 inches. And he said, "You want to shoot him?" I said, "No, I don't want to shoot him." I said, "Let me come back tomorrow afternoon and hang a lock on,
Right.
and let me shoot him with a bow down there where he come out. I'm in." But sitting in a thing watching television, you got a batteries in there watching TV and all that kind of stuff. It's just hunting has changed.
It has. It's before, and I may have talked about this on the podcast. But before the TV show started, I actually did very little hardcore buck hunting. I would go to the Midwest about once or twice a year, and I'd go on my big buck hunt. And the rest of the year, pretty much the rest of the season, my objective was to shoot as many does as I could with the tags I had. And I had a blast. I mean, like, there was, like, oh, I didn't shoot 130-inch deer in the South this year. I didn't care. I killed 10 does. I had a blast. I ate good and, had a lot of success, missed a lot. And I tell you what, I was a better, for lack of a better term, I was a better killer back then. When one walked up there within about 50 yards and I drew back, because you did it all day. And if you can hit a 90-pound doe in Southwest Mississippi, my Uncle Willie, you remember Uncle Willie? Uncle Willie, he passed away a couple years ago, but he told me when I first started bow hunting, he said, "Slade, if you'll shoot about 2 to 3 inches under him, you'll kill more than you'll miss." And dang, he is 100% right. I had video of one day sitting in the west end of the suicide plot, way up in the tree one morning. I shot her. She was on pins and needles, and I shot this far under her on purpose, and it backstrapped her, and I didn't find that doe. I mean, I don't know how far that is a drop. 14 inches, at 30 yards, shooting probably a 300 feet per second bow. So it's if you can hit a young doe on pins and needles in Southwest Mississippi, a big old 245-pound buck in the Midwest ain't real hard to hit,
Right.
It's it's just fun. It gets me fired up. I know we got 100 days, 150 days till bow season. It gets me fired up and ready for it. This inspires me to go ahead and get my summer food plots planted, which I told Don during our lunch break. I got my deer right now eating protein. I'm going to plant my beans here pretty quick. Now with the weather, I don't feel too bad because I couldn't hardly do anything right now because it literally rains 3 to 4 inches every week. But as soon as that cycle kind of stops, I'm going to get my beans planted in front of my house. And my beans are going to feed my deer all summer, but I'm going to have kind of late beans. And it's really about killing some of the deer I know that are coming in there. So I have my clover. I'm going to have very little lax time. I'm going to supplement protein in the middle, and then we're going to have beans. So we're going to have fat, healthy, naturally healthy deer, and hopefully run an arrow through one. As long as new Ryan can hit record and not lose the footage or nothing. That's a different topic. That's going to be on Ryan's exclusive podcast one day. Well, Don, thank you for coming out. We're here at Southern States Realty. Hey, if you need anything in the South, biology-wise and land pro-wise, Don can help you. Great source for information. He's helping a client look for a big lake property or build a lake right now. If you want to help set up your property, he's a vast knowledge of setting a property up, and it's one of his passions like it is mine. Where we can put our food plots, where we're going to put our cutovers, what are we going to do with this timber stand to help with the deer. And it's all fun, and I tell clients that don't know this when they're buying property, that part of the process is just as fun as when you shoot that deer in the food plot.
Absolutely.
The setting it up, the letting him go, what's he going to be next year. And it doesn't always work out like you want to, but the process is just as fun as the end. I've had so much fun on my own personal places just piddling. In the afternoon, I go get on the tractor and do this or do that. It's just part of the process.
I really like going on a property that I've never hunted before, read the natural signs, pick out a spot, and when those deer show up at that spot, there's a real sense of accomplishment in that I figured out where they're going, why they're going there, and maybe guess where they're coming from. It's easier to do that in the Midwest, by the way. You know that. Around here, the habitat's so it's all the same almost. It's hard to figure out where they're coming from. But
There really is no bedding and feeding. It's just all bedding.
right, it's all bedding and maybe all feeding too. But when you do that, you get that great sense of accomplishment that you actually figured out in a natural way where they're coming and going. And I did kill one deer over corn since the law changed. I may kill another one over corn. I don't know.
I'm going to kill another one.
I know you will.
I'm going to. I got two questions. One, it spurred a question when you just said that, and then I've got to ask, before I forget, I'm going to ask our question we ask everybody on the podcast. All right, Don, tomorrow, me and you go down here to the truck stop, Kitwood truck stop. We buy a lottery tickets, and you win $100 million to you. It's $100 million. Where are you buying land and why?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I've been thinking about that a lot. I just spent almost 2 weeks up in the Midwest. I have friends in Iowa, I have friends in northeast Missouri and southeastern Iowa. And I've got the great privilege to go up there and visit and hunt. I was up there, I didn't even turkey hunt half the days I was there. I got a big turkey in Iowa. First time I struck out in northeast Missouri. I got sick, a lot of things entered into all that, but I love that part of the country. I really don't know exactly where I would buy it, but it would be somewhere in the Midwest. But I think I'd split it. I'd spend some of it in the Mississippi Delta. The Mississippi Delta is so strong. It has got the best soils, all that stuff draining out of the Midwest coming right down that Mississippi River. So we got some great opportunities to do some stuff. We got duck hunting, we got deer hunting. It's a great place. I would have a big place in Mississippi, and I'd have another one. Ideally, I would have a spot that straddled the Iowa and the Missouri line.
You and Scott Lindsay would be neighbors right there. That's the same thing here. I don't know if I want Scott as my neighbor. You need to come down a couple miles if you're going to do that. It's funny that you mentioned that area. Of course, me and Ryan bought our property last year in the area you're talking about, and now our new one, which, to update everybody on the Missouri project, I did not get to go up for the turkey hunt as we thought about on the new and the old place. Ryan and Barry Cup went up, had some success. We got the new place bought. I still have not even seen it. I'm going up at the end of the month to plant corn. The baby and the closing dates and everything with me, our baby's doing good, but that did not work out. So we did not, I didn't get to make it up there. So I, like some of my clients, bought a big, nice piece of property. I've never seen it. I'm really trusting my own X and my map reading skills and my knowledge of the area. I hope we made a good decision. Ryan Wascom and my dad both said we did, and my realtor's up there, so hopefully we did. One more question before I let you go, Don. I used to ask this question to people, and whenever you said something, it made me think about it. All right, I'm going to give you two 10,000-acre places. I don't care where they are in the state, just anywhere you want to, in the country, anywhere you want to deer hunt. Let's do this, since we're in Mississippi and we're talking about Mississippi. Two 10,000-acre blocks of land in southwest Mississippi. And the reason I use 10,000 acres, we're going to hunt the center. We're really not affected by the outside the neighbors. I'm going to give you this 10,000 acres right here. It's been highly managed. People have been planting food plots, putting their lime out, shooting the right does, everything they want to. All right, you can hunt 10 days on this property, or you can hunt 10 days on this 10,000 acres, and nobody has stepped foot on deer hunting in the past 20 years. Which one are you picking?
I'm going with the managed property.
Okay. Why?
Well, if it's being well managed, it probably has a better sex ratio and age ratio. It's probably going to have a more balanced timber stands, diversity. Every time you clear cut or whatever, not only is there something to do with the sunlight hitting the ground and the cutover, the edge is very important in wildlife management. The more edge you have, the better off you are. So I'd really rather go with a well-managed place because that's what I've done my whole career is manage things.
And I've asked that question, I hadn't asked it in a long time. I thought about when you said, I would personally, just from a curiosity standpoint, I would have to go hunt on the other. I would just, and it goes back to my deer management days at Tatum and places like that, because if I went to open, if I was hunting there 10 days and the first day, a big 6-year-old 6-point came by that somebody should have been shooting a long time ago, I would just get so much interest in shooting that big old joker that nobody's messed with. And like you said, undisturbed sign. And if you've ever hunted a place where heck, half the places I hunt, the does walk around looking 30 feet up in the tree. But if you could go hunt somewhere maybe where that didn't happen, it would just be interesting to me. I guess that's why I'd go hunt over there. I think I did video this one day. It's a place that I hunt very little in Whitaker. I hunt very little. And I watched this doe walk down through this hardwood bottom one day, and I was way over here, and she was on the other side of the bottom, which I've never had to stand in, and nobody else has in at least 10 years as I've been hunting there. That old heifer was looking 20, 30 feet up in each one of these trees, but she's not going to look anymore because I shot her because she did that. But anyway, that was the last doe that Bull ever found, interestingly enough. But we're going to get out of here, Don. I need one more favor from you. We're going to get out of here. Thank y'all for listening to the Hunting Land Man podcast, brought to you by Southern Ag Credit. We'll be on here in about another 2 weeks, Don. Thank you for coming on. We learned a lot. Go put your lime out, get your soil right, and get you some summer food plots. And if you need anything else, Don can definitely help you with it. Don, hit that little blue button on the top right over there for us, and we're going to end this thing. There you go.
Thank you. Glad to be here.